Greetings, friends and family, and welcome to the Spectre of Truth Show. And I am
Black.
And we are back, and welcome to everybody. Thank you for coming back. If you're tuning back in, I've been looking forward to this one, man. I couldn't hardly wait to get this information over to you. I actually was this was actually going to be part of the first part. This was actually all included in that first video, White Supremacy is Black Ignorance. Subtitle actually is called Deception. But that one word didn't really encompass how deep this thing went. So that's why it's called White Supremacy is Black Ignorance. At some point, we gotta accept the role that we and our ancestors have played in our own destruction. None of these things in history happen in a vacuum. All right, so it wasn't like these people, like everybody around the world, just went out and went buck wild and did whatever that they wanted to do. Whenever one group of people did one thing, there was always another group that was a part of it, but they were either accepting of it, played a hand in it, or they rejected it. And then you read these stories about these great wars that have taken place between two different nations or whatever that had lasted for however long. But it was people resisting, Group B resisting Group A. So that's where your war stories and such come from. When you look at a lot of our stuff, you hear about our ancestors being complicit in a lot of these actions that were being taken against them. So you have to take all of that into consideration. And there's no point trying to hide it, trying to deny it, say it didn't happen. The history is out there, it's documented, and your dirty laundry is already hung up for everybody to see. And it's been hung up for hundreds of years. It was hanging up, flapping in the wind before you and I were even born. So it's there. But anyway, what we can do is to look at the mistakes that have been made in the past. Anybody, if you think strategically and tactically, anybody is going to look back at what's been done and say, okay, how can we change that? Yep, mistakes were made. Things happened that shouldn't have happened. How can we make sure that we have a better future than we had in history? And so there's nothing wrong with messing up, having made mistakes. That's how you grow, that's how you learn. But you have to use that to your advantage to do better in the future. And then at that point, all of that turns out to be a positive because you use that as a stepping stone to get higher. And that's where we need to get to, is learning the past, acknowledging the past, seeing what happened. Yeah, it's like, man, it's embarrassing, what a lot of our ancestors participated in and how they played their part in their own destruction. And a lot of us have still done this today. We talked about in the previous video, we talked about the marches. Our ancestors laying out in the streets, begging for one thing or another. And everybody else all through history, when they wanted something, they just went and got it, went and took it. And we out laying in the street begging for it. These things happen, man. So there's no point denying it. Only thing we can do is try to fix that in the future and start going about things in a more intelligent way, in a more strategic way than what we have in the past. So, as I say, I hope you watched that last one because this is a direct continuation of that. And if you have not watched part one, White Supremacy is Black Ignorance, if you haven't seen that yet, then I urge you to stop this video and go watch that one first, then come back and watch this one. Because this one is going to make frequent references back to that one. All right, so it's all going to be connected. This is part of that. All right, so you're going to need that as a background. So anyway, yeah, the woman king. That's where we left off. See, I was gonna let it slide because, as I said, there's a lot of people that have already been tearing this thing apart and have been exposing it. So in the last week, just since my first video dealing with this, there's been even more videos that have come out and exposed it, tore it apart. They're talking about now the finances of it. I think it's been, 5 weeks since it released, and they're talking about the finances of the movie. I guess it's not doing so well. Viola Davis and all the people that were involved in the movie were happy because the movie made like $19 million in the opening weekend, and they're like, oh, it's a big success. But then it's been steadily declining in terms of financial money coming in, steadily declining over the weeks. Fewer and fewer people are interested in going to see that. More are reading about these expose videos that have been coming out about it. And so at this point now, it's on a decline. And I think it was said they have to make something like $125 million to break even in terms of how much it took to produce it and market it and get it out there to you. It's something like $125 million to break even. And the last they looked at it, the numbers were sitting somewhere around 72 million. So right now it's falling short, and it's going to be considered a flop if they can't at least break even. So there it is. I don't know. I haven't looked into those numbers myself and went and dug up all of the information. Just telling you what's being reported in the other videos that say that they have done all of that research, and they did show the articles on the side and all of that. So that's where that's going right now. But if ever there was a movie that deserved to flop, it was that one. Okay, so this video is not going to be re-exploring what they've already explored. You already know that the movie was about an African tribe that was involved in the slave trade, but the movie presented them as heroes. We already touched on that a little bit. It was already out there. That's no big secret. All these expose videos are talking about that. This touches on that, but that's not really the main focus of this. There's a deeper aspect to it that I haven't heard anybody deal with yet. So that's kind of where I go with all of my videos. I don't deal with what's already out there, the basic, everyday, tried and true information that you can get off your TV set, off CNN or something like that. That's not where I'm trying to go with any of my videos. I go into those lower levels that it's like they'll say, well, hey, there's something deeper, and then I'll come in and say, yeah, it's even something below that. That's where I try to go, and just we got to really pull this stuff out into the light and show it to the people, and this way you can make intelligent decisions about what you want to be a part of or not be a part of. And so that's what all of this is about. So with that said, what's so heavy about the Woman King that I just couldn't pass on putting something together on that? What's so heavy about that? What just had to be said? Why did I have to give this damn thing a whole separate lesson all to itself? Well, let's start off by checking out the movie trailer for those who haven't already seen it. There might have been a few who don't know what I'm talking about, so let's start with the trailer. Check this out.
An evil is coming that threatens our kingdom, our freedom. But we have a weapon they are not prepared for.
My king, the Europeans wish to conquer us. They will not stop until the whole of Africa is theirs. We must fight back for our people.
Aneska, you are asking me to take them to war.
Some things are worth fighting for.
Don't know, take my power. Don't know, take my power.
You are called to join the King's Guard.
Don't know, take my power.
No kingdom in all of Africa shares this privilege. Train hard, fight harder. We fear no one.
They feel away.
And we fear no pain.
They feel away.
I offer you a choice. Fight or we die.
Ready for war, where you run?
To be a warrior, you must kill your tears.
We are the spear of victory! We are the blade of freedom! We are the homie!
Don't know, take my power. Don't know, take my power.
Okay, so now let's get in on this thing, man, and let's talk about the real behind the Woman King. Get settled in and get ready, because I usually try to keep things as simple as I can, but I gotta flex a little bit on this one. You know, this is how deep this thing is. So I gotta go in and I gotta go into some areas and flex the historical muscles, and you know, go into that that ancient knowledge type of stuff that I try not to tap into, because I don't want to alienate the audience by going into the minutia of the dates and the times and the proper names and the proper spellings and what they mean. And you know, we can get into that if folk really want to, but I try not to go into that, because you know, it could really get heavy. So anyway, here it is. Dig this. During the 1800s, the warrior women themselves, which were depicted in the movie, were actually called the Agoji. And they were they were in the Dahomey Kingdom. So the Agoji were in the Dahomey Kingdom. All right. I didn't watch the movie, and you know, I'm just going by the clips and the videos, and I looked up the synopsis of it. I'm not watching it. I have no interest in seeing it. Once I saw what they were dealing with and I looked up the history of it, that's all I needed. They talk about the Dahomey Kingdom in the movie, but it's the Agoji is the name of the women warriors. Okay, they weren't called Amazons, the Amazon queens. They weren't. I've heard people say something about some of that. They weren't called Amazons. They were the Agoji, and they were in the Dahomey Kingdom, okay, which was located in West Africa. Now, according to the website Insider.com, they really were considered national heroes and great symbols of female power. In 1727, see, this stuff is not even really that long ago. We are in 2022, getting ready to go into 2023. This stuff we're talking about here with the Woman King happened in 1727. It's not that far back. So in 1727, the Dahomey conquered the coastal kingdom of, I think it's pronounced Hueda, Hueda, Hueda. And they were taking control of the port city of Ouida. So I'm not sure if I'm getting these pronunciations correct, but I'm gonna put it on the screen, you can see it. But they took control of the port city of Ouida, which then became their main base for trade with the European powers. Okay, so they went in there, went into Ouida, took over the port of Ouida. And that's where they began doing their trade with the Europeans, okay? And this marked the beginning of their participation in the slave trade. Okay, so we're looking at 1727 here. All right, now this is modern day again. This is what we call CE, not BCE. We used to say BC and AD. They did away with AD. Now it's BCE, which means before the Common Era, and CE means Common Era, which means modern day. Okay, so we're living right now in 2022 CE, Common Era, modern day. All right, so this happened in 1727 CE. All right. Now, the Dahomey Kingdom became a key player in the slave trade as far back as 1680. And the Agoji were essentially female special forces. Okay, so this was their special forces group, but it was made up of all females though. All right. And now they didn't just run around and just go buck wild. They actually fought alongside men, but there's a question as to whether or not that there were any men in the Agoji, and I don't think that there were. I think that the Agoji fought with the main Dahomey army, and those were primarily men. So it was one thing that they didn't. I don't think they depicted this of the men fighting with the women. The women weren't just going out doing all by themselves, but they did fight alongside them. Okay. So the main army was made up of men, and their numbers had dwindled significantly due to the constant battles of invading other neighboring nations and neighboring villages and such. So the men numbers started to dwindle. They just tell you how much they were actually fighting with the people around them, how much battles that they were doing. Now they weren't running around fighting white folk, they was running around fighting other African tribes. Okay, and this is where their slave stockpile was coming from. See, now it starts to click. Now you start to see where it all ties together. Okay, and so as the men dwindled from these battles in the region, that's when their numbers got smaller, and so the women began to step up and to take over where there wasn't enough men to fight anymore. Okay, so when the Agoji first started, they eventually became, they started around 600 women, but they grew to over 6,000 at the peak, and this is when they became the primary fighting force of the Dahomey Kingdom. So it was 6,000. So now they became the primary fighting force. There wasn't enough men. All right, and it became 6,000 around its peak, which was right around the mid 1800s. All right, so that's when they were up into those higher numbers. All right, now keep in mind in the movie they were shown as fighting Europeans that came to get slaves, but the fact is that the Europeans were their customers and their trading partners. Okay, the Dahomey were actually invading, as I say, they were invading these neighboring villages. And when you see white folk coming around, they weren't fighting with them initially. These were their customers. So they never showed that. They twisted this whole thing around. All right, and so now when I say invaded neighboring villages, they didn't just go in and cut each other up, stab each other with a spear, and then just drag them back to their own village. These Agoji actually had a reputation for being extremely sick, sadistic, and twisted. They were considered to be bloodthirsty, and this is actually who they were. I don't know that the movie depicted this, but I don't think they went into how sick and twisted that these women really were. All right. So now, according to Hollywood versus Hollywood.com, it was customary for the Dahomey to return home with the rotting heads and genitals of those that they had killed in battle. Okay. Now you can see in this image of the Agoji general, his name is let's see, Se Dong Hong Bei. whose heads they were chopping off. Does he look British or French to you? Okay, so the General Sedong Hong Bay, holding the head there. The head is that's not the head of a French or a British man. Okay. So the Agoji would go into these villages and they would raid them. And there are accounts where they would cut off the heads of the elderly and rip the jawbones off of others and leave them alive to suffer. Then they would burn the villages down to the ground. Those who they let live, including the children, were taken captive and sold as slaves. Okay, so that's where their slaves came from. So I say again that all of these victims were other Africans, not the slave trade. They weren't Europeans, white folks. The British, the French. These were Africans. This is who the Agoji from the Dahomey Kingdom were fighting, and who they were mutilating and butchering along the way. All right, so so when you sit in the theater and you watch this movie and cheer, and like what Brother Schuler King said, man, this was a great movie. This was awesome, and he's talking about that action and how fantastic it was, and Viola put her foot in it, and man, this was bad, and this is actually what you're cheering for them going into other African villages and mutilating and butchering and cutting the genitals and the heads off of other Africans. This is actually who they were. And so when you sit in the theater and cheer for that, that's what you're cheering for, because that's who they really were. You may not have known that, but you can tell somebody a lie, get somebody to cheer for the lie, and what they're really cheering for is what the truth really is. They just don't know it. So you don't have to know what you're cheering for to still be cheering for something that is that sick and twisted. And that's who they were. The slaves were traded in exchange for items like rifles, tobacco, alcohol, and many of the slaves that were sold ended up right here in America. Okay, so we already know what happened to them here when they got here. Now, if you don't know, you can go back and check out an episode of Roots. All right, so you can go back and check that out. But we all know what went down here, you know. So they also, here's what they also don't tell you, that these Dahomey actually kept some of the slaves for themselves to work on their own royal plantations. All right, so here's Africans having their own slaves, selling some here, keeping some for themselves, right? And this is how the Dahomey tribe became a wealthy nation in Africa, and this is also how America became a wealthy nation here.
Well, we're justified in seeking civil rights if it means equality of opportunity, because all we're doing there is trying to collect for our investment. Our mothers and fathers invested sweat and blood. 310 years we worked in this country without a dime in return. I mean, without a dime in return. You let the white man walk around here talking about how rich this country is, but you never stop to think how it got rich so quick. It got rich, you made it rich. You take the people who are in this audience right now, they're poor, we're all poor as individuals. Our weekly salary individually amounts to hardly anything. But if you take the salary of everyone in here collectively, it'll fill up a whole lot of baskets. It's a lot of wealth. If you can collect the wages of just these people right here for a year, you'll be rich, richer than rich. When you look at it like that, think how rich Uncle Sam had to become. Not with this handful, but millions of black people, your and my mother and father, who didn't work an 8-hour shift, but worked from can't see in the morning until can't see at night. And worked for nothing, making the white man rich, making Uncle Sam rich. This is our investment. This is our contribution, our blood. Not only did we give of our free labor, we gave of our blood. Every time he had a call to arms, we were the first ones in uniform. We died on every battlefield the white man had. We have made a greater sacrifice than anybody who's standing up in America today. We have made a greater contribution and have collected less. Have collected less. Civil rights to those of us whose philosophy is black nationalism means give it to us now. Don't even wait next year. Give it to us yesterday. And that's not fast enough.
All right, now, each year in Dahomey, roughly 500 slaves and criminals were mass executed in large-scale human sacrifices during the religious ceremonies of a festival known as the Annual Customs of Dahomey. All right, so again, not only were they going in and butchering in the villages, they were involved in the slave trade, but then they were involved also participating in ritualistic executions, sacrificing to their gods or whatever the hell they were sacrificing to. So most of those who were sacrificed were done so by way of decapitation. All right, this was a method of killing which was widely used by the Dahomeyan kings. In 1727, annual customs of the Dahomey ceremony reportedly saw as many as 4,000 people sacrificed. All right, in the movie Naniska, that was Viola Davis's character. Naniska is the general of the Agoji, all right, and now while she appears to be almost entirely fictional, like they just literally pieced her together out of thin air. So while she appears to be almost entirely fictional, French naval officer John Bayol, who visited the region in December of 1889, wrote of watching a teenage recruit named Naniska, who had not yet killed anyone. He describes her as approaching a young prisoner. This is how they initiate them, okay? He describes her as approaching a young prisoner sitting bound in a basket. And Naniska took her sword in both hands and tried to decapitate him. See, they were getting her orientated into this. But she had to hack at his neck 3 times, and even then only partially decapitated him. Then she cut the remaining flesh that was still connecting the head to the body and squeezed the blood off of her weapon and swallowed it. Okay, this is the character that Viola Davis was portraying. They didn't show that in the movie, did they? That these were blood drinkers. All right. While Viola Davis's character is much older, her character seems to be a mix of the Agoji general that I previously mentioned, Sedong Hong Bae, and this teenage Naniska that the French officer observed. So both of these were women. Sedong Hong Bae was female, all right, and Naniska also being female. And so they kind of took and combined these two characters, and then this is the Naniska that was in the movie. See how they blended this together, all right? So in addition, you should also be aware that the Milaje from the Black Panther movie were also based on the Agoji female warriors. How many knew that? Okay, so they already, see, they got your history. They don't tell you anything about this. We haven't heard anything about any of this before these movies came out, before the Black Panther movie came out, before this Warrior King movie came. We haven't heard any of this stuff. They weren't teaching it to us in school. So how do they have all this information now? Then they present it to us in a warped, twisted fashion to make heroes out of the worst that our ancestors could have possibly produced. And then they present them to us as heroes and got black folk all over the nation, possibly around the world, cheering and clapping for blood-drinking, sick, twisted subhumans. Okay? Now, I'm going to show you, it gets deeper. It gets worse than this, man. Check this out. By the end of the 1800s, the British had abolished slavery and had actually been pressuring the Dahomey and their leader. The leader was named Gizzo. And he was the one that was played by John Boyega in the movie, to end slavery. Y'all get this, man? The British went into, one of the biggest slave traders in the world, went into Dahomey and said, look, man, y'all doing too much, man. That's enough. Stop. Y'all got to stop this slave trade stuff now. That's enough. And, all right, when the British got to come tell you to stop selling slaves, that's saying something, okay? So they were in there dealing with Gizzo, John Boyega, and the British were pressuring him to end slavery in their land as the British had ended it in theirs. So they said, we're not customers anymore. We're not buying any more from you. So y'all might as well stop. Just stop. Let it go. Now, Gizzo actually did try to stop trading in slaves for a while. And he started selling palm oil instead, okay? But it was nowhere near as lucrative as the slave trading. So they went back to trading slaves again. It's all about just getting that money coming in, man. See? They were trading for trinkets, gold, rifles, whatever that they needed. You know, here, we give you some more slaves for that. Give some blankets. Here, take all these Negroes over here and give us those blankets over there. They probably didn't call them Negroes, but you know, this is what they dealt with. This is how they did it. Okay? Now, this put the Dahomey at odds against the Europeans, which included the British and the French. So now they got two groups of white folk that's mad at them and telling them to stop selling slaves. Two of the world's largest slave traders telling Africans to stop selling slaves. They ain't talking about none of this. See what I'm saying? I told you it's gonna be heavy, man. And and it gets worse. Okay, so now that the British and the French had opposed the Dahomey, this put them in opposition, in direct confrontation now against the Agoji. See? So now here we go. Now you got white folk coming into the region. See? All right, now, coming into the region as something other than slave traders, as something other than to purchase more of your people. See, now they're not coming down to buy anything. They're coming down to stop you. The bit, man, come on. The Agoji actually participated in several battles, but proved to be little match for the superior weaponry and longer bayonets used by the French soldiers. In one battle, 417 Agoji were killed in only 6 hours, with nearly all falling at the tips of the French bayonets rather than being shot from a distance. So they was bad when they was going into some villages and fighting people with sharp sticks and women and children and dragging them away back to other villages, back to their village, and putting them into slavery. And they was bad with that. They could sneak through the bushes, nobody know they there, and then do a sneak attack while they in there asleep or cooking dinner or whatever, and then they come busting out of the bushes. They could do that. But when they got to go toe to toe with some real soldiers, with some real warriors, and they in hand to hand, now these women is fighting men that's ready for battle, that's trained for hand to hand combat. Couldn't do it. 417 killed in 6 hours. All right, and all of them falling at the tips of the French bayonets, meaning that they in hand to hand. They couldn't handle that hand to hand because they were fighting men. Okay, you understand how deep that goes? I mean, what that really means. That whole movie was all about women proving their strength and bravery to be superior to the man. Remember they had that spike through the shoulder and she's pushing it, and then he drops it. Oh, you can't, he can't do it. And she's screaming, she's stronger than the man. That's what they were trying to show you, the superior to the man. But in real life, when they actually fought men, they were crushed in hand-to-hand combat, while the French men suffered little to no casualties. Okay? Now stop and think about that for a minute, man. The French and British, of all people, are now in Africa fighting to try and force an African colony to stop trading slaves. And the Africans, the women in particular, were fighting to keep the slave trade going.
You suck!
See what I'm saying? No, I haven't heard anybody talk about this yet. Not to that detail. Maybe it is. I just haven't heard about it, and I certainly never, heard of any of this in school. It's on another level. This kind of stuff here, when you hear about this, it's shocking. This is crazy, and it shows Africans in a light that we have really never seen before. Okay, so and let me tell you something else. You all owe Kanye West an apology. Do you all remember what Kanye said about slavery back in 2018? He said that in order for slavery to have lasted as long as it did, it had to have been a choice that black people remained slaves for over 400 years. Actually, it was closer to 600, because it wasn't just slavery here in this country. Okay, they were slave trading all around the world. And black folks lost their mind on Kanye. Watch him in this clip and watch how the brother flips out in the back. Check this out.
When you hear about slavery for 400 years, that sounds like a choice. Like, you was there for 400 years and it's all of y'all?
Do you feel that I'm do you feel that I'm being free and I'm thinking free?
I actually don't think you're thinking anything. I think what you're doing right now is actually the absence of thought. And the reason why I feel like that is because Kanye, you're entitled to your opinion. You're entitled to believe whatever you want. But there is fact and real world, real life consequence behind everything that you just said. And while you are making music and being an artist and living the life that you've earned by being a genius, the rest of us in society have to deal with these threats to our lives. We have to deal with the marginalization that has come from the 400 years of slavery that you said for our people was a choice. Frankly, I'm disappointed, I'm appalled, and brother, I am unbelievably hurt by the fact that you have morphed into something, to me, that's not real. Bro, you gotta be responsible, man.
Bro, I'm sorry I hurt you.
You gotta be responsible, dog.
I'm sorry I hurt you, bro.
Your voice is too big. You got.
See, people went nuts, and Kanye was later forced to publicly apologize for saying it. But now he's been proven to have been correct. Kanye was not lying, and he was not crazy, and he just didn't have the history, the dates, and the names to back up that feeling that he was getting. He felt something was wrong. He picked up on it, and he was right. That's a very intuitive brother, because he's shown time and time again that he can start talking about something and kind of discern what's going on behind the scenes without actually knowing what's going on behind the scenes, and then bring it out to the forefront and say it, and everybody say, yo, he crazy. But he's telling you something that actually happened, even though he didn't really have knowledge of it. But he was right. Okay? He nailed it. Dead on. So y'all need to contact Kanye. Let him see this video. And let him know that he was right and he's been vindicated and cleared. His name is clear. He was on target when he said what he said. Okay? So, the only thing that finally slowed down their slave trade was when the French ships began to block off the trade routes. They started putting the ships out there in the waters, and the ones that were still trading. And when they wanted to send slaves out somewhere, they couldn't get them out. Okay, so this is how far they had to go to stop the Dahomey from trading slaves. Yet the Agoji still continued raiding other villages, even without necessarily being able to sell the slaves. They kept doing the raids. All right, but finally, after so many losses to the British and the French, and plus during the raids and such, the Dahomey's military dominance finally started to wane for the same reason that the men lost dominance. Now the Agoji started dwindling in numbers too. It was just that constant fighting and high losses, and their forces began to dwindle. In the late 1850s, actually 1851, the Agoji tried to capture a well-fortified capital in the region of Egba, and that's what's now known as southwest Nigeria. Okay, this battle resulted in the deaths of up to 2,000 Agoji. Dahomeyan forces continued to target Egba villages until the early 1890s, when the war with the French threatened the kingdom's very existence. The Dahomey continued fighting the French over the years. Now, if you've ever heard of the French Foreign Legion, that's who the Dahomey were fighting. They are the French version of the U.S. Marines. Now, as the Dahomey continued to fight, they lost dozens more warriors in every encounter, sometimes hundreds. Now, while the French lost maybe a few dozen, if any, in 1892, there was a 7-week war called the Second Franco-Dahomeyan War, and this is where roughly 1,200 of the Agoji were still in fighting shape at the beginning of the war. Just 50 or 60 remained ready for battle by the end of it. They're getting wiped out. Okay, they couldn't fight. They could not fight men. As much as they try to put that out there, when they came to battle, when they started fighting men, they started getting cut down. All right, when they was running around fighting, invading African villages at night, sneaking up on them while they was asleep or eating dinner, they were tearing them apart. When they started fighting soldiers ready for war, real soldiers, they got slaughtered. All right. Now, in contrast, the French side lost 52 Europeans and 33 Africans on the battlefield. Okay. So the Africans who wanted to help stop the Dahomey had started joining the French. See, now you got Africans going over and joining. Africans got to join white folks to stop black folks from selling slaves. Come on, man. In total, between 2,000 and 4,000 Dahomeyan soldiers, including both men and women, were killed. Naniska, Viola's character, was found dead on the battlefield next to the French army's decapitated chief gunner. She chopped his head off. So she went down in battle. She went down fighting. But upon seeing Naniska's body, the French general later wrote that a cleaver with an engraved curved blade was attached to her left wrist by a small cord. Their entire tribe was actually now in danger of being completely wiped out. They were about to do genocide on these people to stop them. They were getting completely eliminated. European observers noted that the Agoji handled themselves admirably in hand-to-hand combat with the French during their first battle of the region of Cotonou during the first Franco-Dahomeyan War of 1890. But while the Agoji has started in the 1850s with over 6,000 Agoji warrior women, in 40 years they were left with just now, they down to a few dozen. All right, and the French officially seized the Dahomey capital of Abomey on November 17th, 1892. Okay, so that's the Agoji of the Dahomey tribe. Slavers, killers, murderers. This is who y'all cheering for in this movie. Blood drinkers. All right, insanity. All right, subhumans, beasts, creatures of the night, baby killers. Okay, and probably, you know, were they cannibals? Were they eating some of these people that they were chopping up? I didn't see that written, but I don't. The way that they were going on and chopping off the genitals and chopping off their heads, and you know, were they eating some of these body parts that they was cutting up? They were drinking the blood. So this is who this movie got you cheering for. All right, this bullshit movie, and that's who they got you cheering for in the Black Panther movie. When you saw the women and the women was fighting in the spears and they spinning the spears around, and it's like, oh man, yeah, you know, that was a good movie. Yeah, that was them too. That was them. They didn't tell us the names of who they got it from or where they got it from, but the Malay, I think what they call it, the Malay with a whatever. That was them. That were the Agoji. That was them. See how they got you? This is what I was talking about in the other one. They got you cheering for the slave masters of your ancestors. Okay? This deception. That's what I'm talking about. All right, got you sending them your old gold for $20 or $30. Deception. And we keep falling for it over and over and over and over because we don't know. Malcolm X always talked about how one of the biggest problems of the black man in this country is that we don't know history.
The Honorable Elijah Muhammad teaches us that of all the things the black man can study, or any man can study for that matter, history is best qualified to reward all research. You have to have a knowledge of history no matter what you're going to do. Anything that you undertake, you have to have a knowledge of history in order to be successful in it. The thing that has made the so-called Negro in America fail more so than any other thing is your and my lack of knowledge concerning history. We know less about history than anything else. There are black people in America who have mastered the mathematical sciences, have become professors and experts in physics, are able to toss Sputniks out there in the atmosphere, out in space. They're masters in that field. We have black men who have mastered the field of medicine. We have black men who have mastered other fields. But very seldom do we have black men in America who have mastered the knowledge of history of the black man himself. They are experts. We have among our people those who are experts in every field. But seldom can you find one from among us who is an expert on the history of the black man. And because of his lack of knowledge concerning the history of the black man, no matter how much he excels in these other sciences, he's always confined. He's always relegated to the same low rung of the ladder that the dumbest of our people are relegated to. And all of this stems from his lack of knowledge concerning history. What made Dr. George Washington Carver a Negro scientist instead of a scientist? What made Paul Robeson a Negro actor instead of an actor? What made Ralph Bunche, or makes Ralph Bunche, a Negro statesman instead of a statesman? The only difference between Bunche and Carver and these others whom I just mentioned, they don't know the history of the black man. Bunche is an expert, an international politician, a politician on the international level. But Bunche doesn't know himself. He has no knowledge of the history of his own people. He can be sent all over the world by America to solve problems for America or to solve problems for other nations, but he can't solve problems for his own people in this country. Why? What is it that What is it that ties our people up in this way? The Honorable Elijah Muhammad says it boils down to just one word: history. When you study the history of Bunch, his history is different from the history of the black man who just comes here from Africa. And if you notice, Bunch was in Atlanta, Georgia during the summer NAACP convention. He was Jim Crow. He was segregated. He was not allowed to go in a hotel down there. Yet there are Africans who can come here black as night and go in some of these cracker hotels. Well, what is the difference between Bunch and one of them? The difference is Bunch doesn't know his history, and they, the Africans, do know their history. They may come here out of the jungles, but they know their history. They may come here wearing sheets with their head all wrapped up, but they know their history. You and I can come out of Harvard, but we don't know our history. And the basic difference in why we are treated as we are, one knows his history and one doesn't know his history. The American Negro doesn't know his history. The American so-called Negro is a soldier who doesn't know his history. He's a servant in America who doesn't know his history. He's a graduate from Harvard or Columbia or Yale or Howard or Tuskegee who doesn't know his history. And because he doesn't know his history, he's confined. He's limited. He's held under the control and the jurisdiction of the white man who knows more about the history of the Negro than the Negro knows about himself. But when you and I wake up, as we're taught by the Honorable Elijah Muhammad, and learn our history, learn the history of our kind as well as the history of the white kind, then then the white man is at a disadvantage and we're at an advantage. The only thing that puts you and me at a disadvantage is our lack of knowledge concerning history. So one of the reasons, one of the missions, one of the objectives of the Honorable Elijah Muhammad here in America is not only to teach you and me the right religion, but to teach you and me history. In fact, do you know that if you and I know history, we know the right religion? The only way right now that you can become confused, become mixed up and not know which religion belongs to God is if you don't know history. In fact, you have to know history to know something about God. You have to know history to know something about God's religion. You have to know history to know something about God's people. You have to know history to know something about God's plans and God's purposes. And as I say, the only people who don't know history are the American so-called Negroes. And the only Negroes who will contend with this are those who don't know history. And most Negroes don't know history. And most Negroes will contend with it.
So, you don't know your history. And it's not to say that you have to know all of this. I didn't have all of this over the years. This is new information for me too. But I knew enough that when I looked at that movie, it didn't set right with me. I was like, something about this ain't, no. These women just running around and just jumping through the air, and she's swinging the sword and just cutting folks down, and just nobody can stop her. There's something about this don't seem right. You know, all these women out here just running things, and you know nobody can stop. Yeah, something don't say. It just felt like something was off. And so then when I finally did the research, there it is. They got you cheering for the slave masters of your ancestors. They got you cheering and clapping for the murderers of your forefathers and great mothers. They got you cheering for baby killers. They got you cheering for blood drinkers. See, this is who you've been clapping for. Check out these ignorant jackals after watching the movie.
They're all chanting and ruminating that cannot be quantified by words. It's an undeniable, powerful story. We're in an industry that doesn't see the power black women have at the global box office.
Woman king, baby.
Then Viola Davis had the nerve to get on an interview and try to guilt trip people into going to see this bullshit.
If you don't come see it, then you're sending a message that black women cannot lead the box office globally. That you are supporting that narrative.
See? So people supported it just because it was black women running around dominating everybody in the movie. That's what they wanted to see. And then they in the bathroom screaming and cheering because they showed black women kicking everybody's ass. All right? But you see what they're really cheering for. See how ignorant? It's dumb. All right? So what you saw in that story was what they turned into when allowed to just go completely buck wild with no restrictions or penalty for their behavior. That's what happens when when you get a group of individuals, particularly women, which are hyper emotional. Everything is based on emotion, and with no type of restrictions or any kind of holds or bars put on them, restraints or anything to that level, whether psychological or real, then if taken to its ultimate form, the story of the Agoge that I just told you is what happens when they're completely left unchecked. So you see, so this is, this is what happens. Now they had a check, they had a gauge, a fuse, a meter on them in the pre-90s, which was the black man. Black man was the king of the house back in the 70s and the 80s, 60s, 50s, 40s, 1. He ruled the house. They couldn't get out of hand back then. They couldn't just beat on the child back then non-stop, leave the child beaten and bloody. They couldn't do it because that man would visit that back on her. Had she done that to the children back then, he'd come home from work and see that child beaten and bloody. She probably would have ended up looking just like that child. That was the fuse, the gauge. And so you didn't really have to hear a lot of stories of that happening back then because they didn't even really try it. They already knew, like, I can't, no, my man will be home in an hour. My husband will be here. No, I ain't doing that, no. Because he ain't going to be coming in here looking at me talking about what happened to him. No. See, it didn't even go that way. You had the family there, you had the father, the children, you had the wife, and so now we call that the good old days now, quote unquote, because of how smooth things tended to go back then. Okay, so yeah, but there was no penalty. If you don't have a penalty for behavior, then this is what happens. Now people will say, no, that's not true. But how does a child act?
Boy, we got a jit going ham in dollar store. I'm talking about jit is going ham in dollar store. Believe that. I'm talking about jit is mad. Jit don't got no family. Jit say fuck this shit. Definitely. Cereal everywhere. Jit is crazy. We don't know who Jit this is, bro. Jit is just going ham, you feel me? I ain't caught nothing like this in a while. Hey, I'm talking about, bro, like Jit. Oh, Jit going, nobody don't know who Jit this is, bro. Like, hey, Jit. Like, Jit is going ham in this bitch. We is in dollar store. Hey, Jit going ham, man. Look at this shit. You hit me with that, you gonna lose your life. That ain't bullshit. You hear me? Look at this shit. The man in the store don't even know what to do. Boy, YouTube, boy, you hear me, boy? I'm on YouTube for real. This Jit need his ass beat. Hey, Jit going ham, man. Look at this shit. You hit me with that, you gonna lose your life. That ain't bullshit. You hear me?
When they know that there's no penalty for their behavior, they tear up everything in sight. If a child knows that he's not going to get in trouble for anything, they turn into what you see in some of these grocery stores. You go in there and the little kid in there kicking and screaming and knocking everything off the shelf and tearing up the store because he's raised by parents who give him no discipline, no direction, no guidance. There's no penalty for anything that this child does, and he knows it. So whenever he doesn't get his way, he just goes buck wild and starts tearing everything up. See? Well, obviously, as you can see, women are pretty much the same way. You know, you can say that, no, but we look at today where they come out the quote unquote all this women's empowerment, and what do we see? We see them on climbing the counters at McDonald's and fighting everybody at the store and knocking everything up. Same thing. So you can say no all you want, but the video evidence is all over the place now. We can see it. And then the historical evidence is there. You can see it. The story that I just gave you is the final result of having no limits, having no restrictions. All right. So that's the Agoge. As I say, you can't say no that women would not become that because without restriction and penalty, because they have already become that without restriction and penalty. It's already happened. You can say, well, the men were involved too. That's true. But the men didn't become famous for committing the inhuman atrocities. They took it to another level. While the men may have been had a hand in invading the villages and waging the wars and such, it was the women, the Agoge, who became famous, or rather infamous, as chopping off the genitals and chopping off the heads, and Laniska hacking at the man's head three times, trying to get the head off, and then the tendons and things still connected. Then she got to cut through that and then squeeze the blood off and drink that. That's her story. There's not a man that's attached to that. Maybe men have did it, but we can assume and guesstimate that men have been doing this too. But we have it documented that they participated in that they did it, and took great joy and pride in this behavior. So you can clearly see now what a truly horrific thing that they did by tricking black people into glorifying and praising the ones who destroyed our ancestors as well as our original culture and detached us from the ancestral homeland. So, we can complain, man, we over here, we don't have our culture, we don't have this, we don't have... The black women of Africa, the Agoge, played a huge part in making that happen. Yep, the men were involved. Yep, the king was a man. He was, yeah. But as I say, the atrocities came from the women. Okay, and when the Europeans went down there, white folk went down there to try to stop it, they had to wage war against the Africans, and the women were leading this war to keep this thing going. Okay, so, but even after all of that, that's not the real trick that they put on you. All of you all who watched the movie, all of you all who applauded and cheered for the Dahomey women, it goes even deeper than that. Yeah, they got you real good on this one, man. Real good. This worse than old gold, getting you to send some old gold. All right. So, to understand the full extent of this, you got to ask the question, why did they choose to glorify the Dahomey out of all the heroic people that appeared out of slavery? Why them? Why haven't we seen a big budget movie about Nat Turner? I looked it up, and they did do a movie about him called The Birth of a Nation. See, his name isn't even in the title, but it's supposed to be about him. Now, if you look at the video clips of it, which I'm not even going to waste your time to show it here, it's so low budget and just cheap looking. Come on, man. The fact that they would put something out there like that to represent Nat Turner, and in almost every scene they showed him getting beaten and whipped. Nat Turner rounded up a band of some bad brothers, and they went from house to house, plantation to plantation, over a period of time, chopping heads. They would get in some old slave master's house and killed everybody in there. It was the first time that the white slave masters really started to second guess this thing about owning slaves. That's how shook that they were. Nat and his group, I think they were called the Night Riders, the Riders or something. I'm not sure, but Nat and his group almost ended the whole damn slave trade industry all by themselves. Because they started really stopping to think, man, these slaves is killing us. We don't know which ones is in it and which ones is not. Maybe we need to let the whole thing go. Okay. Now, why didn't they make a big $50 million movie about him if you want to do some damn slave movies? Okay. Oh, wait. Because it wasn't. So you mean it wasn't just about doing a movie showing black people rising up and fighting and being powerful. They specifically wanted to do something that empowered and glorified black women, not men. And definitely not black men. Ah, okay. Got it. I got it. Yeah. See, it wasn't, that's why they couldn't do Nat Turner, because that's a black man. It's a man and it's a black man. It's a double negative. Man is the first negative, being a black man is the second negative. You got a double negative, they not getting nothing. The black woman, they'll push her up, because if you got one that you push up and one that you push down or just leave down or don't do anything with, it causes a division, it causes a break. See what I'm saying? Okay, this one can never get along with that one now, because that one, especially if they're hyper emotional, is going to glorify, yeah, we this, we that. You know, you can't touch us, you can't see us, you know, we beyond you. See? And that's exactly what you can see. Okay? So if they didn't want to make a movie about a man, a heroic man during the slave trade, and they definitely didn't want to make one about a black man, heroic black man during the slave trade, then why didn't they make a movie about the real warrior queen who actually did fight against slavery? We wasn't supposed to find out about that. Why didn't they make a movie about her who really did fight against the slavery against the Europeans with an all-female army? Yeah. How come y'all didn't tell the people about Mbande Nzinga? Yeah, y'all don't want to hear about, y'all don't want the people to know about her, huh? And don't try to switch it up later and say that this is who you all were actually talking about. Hell no. She was in a whole different tribe with a different name and a totally different story and a different background. And her tribe was almost 1,000 miles away from the Dahomey. All these people have been talking about all this time is the Dahomey tribe. Some damn slave runners. Okay, baby killers, blood drinkers, subhumans, beasts. All right, that's who they glorified. That's who Viola ran around playing and getting people to cheer for. Keep that same story with that same energy now. But meanwhile, for the rest of us, let me tell you how they really got you. Oh, y'all gonna love this. Nzinga actually lived and died almost 70 years before the Woman King story even took place. All of this is very important because we can't let them get a free pass by talking about the Dahomey and then later on pretended that they were talking about Nzinga. Hell no. All right, don't let them switch it up. So without doing a whole hour-long write-up, I just want to touch on a few key points here. Nzinga was almost the exact opposite of everything that was documented about Naniska and the Dahomey. Okay, there was a Naniska. She used the name, so she can't go back and say that she was Nzinga. No, you was Naniska, and you was in the Dahomey, and these were subhuman creatures from hell. Okay, and now don't try to switch up later talking about you was Naniska, you were Nzinga. No. Nzinga and her people were not blood drinkers, and she and her warriors did not slaughter other African villages, nor did she enslave them. Nzinga was well loved among her people and well respected even by the Portuguese that she and her people were fighting against. See, a lot of people don't know that the Portuguese were some of the earliest African slave traders, and they're the ones who hipped America to the game. Because when America first started going to get slaves, Africans were coming to help the Americans build their country willingly and were not considered slaves. They were architects and designers and general workers, and they worked for an agreed upon period of time, and then they were taken back to Africa in exchange for fresh workers. Ain't nobody ever said nothing about that, did they? See? Now, again, props to Kanye. They were voluntarily coming over to work, and then it'd be taken back and get fresh workers. They were not called slaves initially. Now, that was in the 1500s, but it was the Portuguese who told the American colonials that they didn't have to return them. Just keep them and go get more if you want. There's nothing that they can do about it. This was now they got them to start doing that in the early 1600s. Now, like 1619, and that's when America switched from importing workers to importing slaves. Now, I can't tell you where I got that specific info from because I found all of this during my studies decades ago. Actually, a lot of my info is just quick, is from quick online searches, but a lot more of it is from research that I did and books and documents that I kept going back into the 90s. Yeah, man, I'm old school with this. So, you know, I started to work in computer tech support, and while everybody else was going to lunch, it's back in the 90s, they're going back to lunch to stuff their gullet. I used to go across the street to Barnes and Nobles and would just scour the shelves for any kind of wild information that I could find. You know, I just go up and down the shelves until I felt like maybe this one, let me check this out, let me check that. I didn't know even what was in these different aisles. I would just walk around until I felt like maybe this one might be something I wanted to look at, wanted to read. And then I'd buy like 7 or 8 books at a time because I had over an hour-long bus ride to get back home across town, and I didn't have anything to do on that bus ride. So I said, instead of just, everybody else on there just asleep and listening to music, had the earphones on, you could hear the music going or whatever, right? So I started out doing the same thing, just sitting there nodding off, sleep, music, earbuds in, whatever, but I decided I didn't want to waste all that time. So I decided I wanted to educate myself on history. And so I have a nice little collection of books now, but they're all packed away in boxes and such. And so to be able to tell you what book has what in it, so I never had a massive collection that was filled with that would have filled a whole wall or anything like that, because I was only taking that bus ride for a few years. So eventually I didn't have the time anymore. When I stopped riding the bus, then I didn't have the time anymore. So also, once Google came out, then we didn't need 150 books or to have to go across town to the library anymore. That was another thing I did, spend time in the library going to get stuff out of there. So all the information you wanted to know was now at our fingertips, okay? See, these youngsters don't know today, but the internet and Google are all actually brand new. The internet was new in the early to mid 90s, and Google didn't even exist yet. Google just started in 1998, okay? So this is all new stuff. But before that, it was old school, and we were going to the libraries. We were renting documentaries on VHS tape. We were renting books. We were buying books, and we had libraries in the house. Okay, we had bookshelves that was lined with books all the way across. It'd be a whole wall dedicated to just books, or 2 or 3 walls, just books. All right, and it was considered almost disgraceful if you didn't have a library in your home, because it meant that you weren't studying anything. people considered you kind of dumb if you couldn't show off a nice collection of books. A nice library in a typical black man's home might look something like this. And I say black man because black women weren't collecting books and building their own libraries like that initially. The men started that. So actually, it was white men that started it. And their libraries were just ridiculous. You know, they were building these big libraries even up in Europe before they ever established this country over here. They were already into it. Check this out. Now, before they were in America, they were building massive and elaborate libraries in their mansions up in Europe. And they had the whole thing up there. So what happens is, when you do a lot of reading on that level, of course you can't remember every word on every page and who wrote those words or these words and so on. But when you do a lot of study and research, what happens is that you begin to build an overall view and understanding of the world and its history based on all of that reading. So if you ask someone, where did you get all that information from? They really couldn't tell you because their knowledge is based on a conglomeration of 10, 20, 30 years of study. In fact, when black folks started getting more into this kind of thing in the 90s, and they started using information as a weapon to try and attack and discredit each other, you see them online and they're debating out in the street and screaming each other down and all of this. Okay, so that was always one of the first debate questions that they would ask. What's your resources? Where'd you get that from? Then, if you did tell them, then they would go in and try to discredit that author too. So now, even the ones who wrote the book is wrong. Okay? Oh, you following him? You listen to what he say? Well, he's a white man. You can't trust him. So that whole book, anything that he wrote, throw that away. Oh, you following that? Well, yeah, that came from this guy over here, and he had a criminal record, so throw that book away. So anything that you told them, they would try to discredit it and throw it all away. So ultimately, the winner of the argument was always the one who received the least amount of discredit. If he can go in and tell you your authors wasn't shit, and they can tell him that his authors wasn't shit, and this one's standing there and you didn't know what authors that he was following, and you didn't know the background of the authors that he's quoting or where he said he got this from or whatever, or who he quoted to say that gave him the information. If you couldn't discredit them, then he won the debate. So it's never about the truth or the facts or the data. It's just about who can discredit who the most. See? But that's not what this thing was ever supposed to be about, and it was never that vicious against each other. It wasn't intended to be that. So, you can go around in circles with your detractors forever and never come to a conclusion. I myself have actually looked up information in an online encyclopedia and found errors and sent in corrected information. I mean, it's no big deal. It happens, So when we're dealing with this data, we're dealing with tons and tons of data going back thousands of years. Of course, there's going to be errors. Everything doesn't have to be word for word perfect and correct. But there's also such thing as intentionally deceiving people for nefarious reasons, your own reasons, and for an agenda. And there's no excuse for that. All right, but I personally try not to get into all that non-stop debate. I just put the information out there, and I encourage people not to believe me. You don't have to take my word for anything. I'd actually rather that you take what I give you and then go look it up on your own and tell me what you found, and then we can have a discussion. So as I said, I started my research almost as soon as the internet was built. As soon as the internet came online, I was collecting books in 94, 95 and using it for Google searches and corroborating all of that data in 98, 99. And putting it into websites. I was creating websites and flowcharts and timelines. And so that's almost 30 years of research and study. So I was doing my research and study before you could even do research and study on the internet. All right. But I still tell everybody, don't believe me. Just go look it up for yourself. Don't try to argue and bicker with me back and forth like our people. They like to do that. Everything is an argument. Just go get your information together, get your dates and your times together, and don't come back talking about in biblical days and John did this and Mary said that. Go get your dates and your times and your proper names together. Then come back and make your presentation and prove me wrong, and we can have a discussion. So I don't have a problem saying, oh damn, yeah, I missed that one. Yep, I didn't even know that. Yeah, you're right. Yep, that's true. Yeah, that did happen. So okay, cool. And then I'll keep that in mind for the future. I appreciate you telling me that. But for me, if I got 50 or 100 or 500 black folks out there digging up information and trying to prove me wrong, then for me, that's mission accomplished. If y'all out there doing all that research just to try to prove me wrong, that's mission accomplished, because whether I was wrong or right, it doesn't matter. The fact is that I got you out there doing research. And so that's mission accomplished right there. It doesn't matter what you come back with. If you're out there researching based on something that I said, cool, it's all good. All right. So anyway, I said all of that just to give you some background on the origin of some of this information that I'm giving you. Because I do realize that most people have never heard any of this, so it might sound crazy. But if all that you know came from church and school when you were 12, or you just know what mama and granny, gave you, then yeah, this stuff that I'm telling you is going to sound crazy. So while Viola Davis's Nanisca character was dealing primarily with the French Foreign Legion in the 1800s, Nzinga had already been dealing with the Portuguese in the early 1600s. Okay, she already came and went before Viola Davis's character ever showed up. Now, I try not to get too heavy with this information, but some of it just cannot be watered down. This information I'm about to give you is the watered down version. It's from a project I was working on way back in 2010. Okay, so I don't know how much simpler I can make it. Hopefully you can pick up what I'm saying and take some notes. So check this out. Get your pen and your paper together. Nzinga was part of a large and ancient ethnic group that lived in modern day Angola called Mbundu. But so the people named the land according to the name of the people that lived there. So the people were the Mbundu. So if anybody asked one of them where they lived, they would have said Mbundu. Okay, so some of them may have thought that this was the name of the land, and it was, but the land was named after the people. Follow me? Okay, so the Mbundu were divided into clans. These clans were the Songo, the Lenge, Lebolo, Hungu, Pende, Ndongo, and the Mbangala. Every group was made up of clans which were all descended from and identified with their mother's side of the family. All of the marriages were also marriages between clans and were related maternally. Okay, so this was different from in Europe, where the lineages were traced back through the father. A lot of our people all around through Africa throughout history have always traced their lineages through the mother. All right, so I think that that was probably global for a while, and it wasn't until Europe started to take power that changed over to where the paternal lineage became all-encompassing. But anyway, now Nzinga's family ruled the Ndongo people, and the Mabundo. This is all of them together again. When you say Mabundo, we talking about all clans. And they called their ruler by the title Ngola, which means one who rules. The Portuguese heard this and thought it was the name of the country. Thus, the country of Ndongo Ndongo is still mistakenly called by the name Angola, which today we say Angola, meaning ruler. To this very day, it still perpetuate that error. Okay, so he said, well, who's your ruler? You know, they would say, well, you know, who's here, who rules it? And they were trying to say, you know, Angola, which means ruler, and they thought that was the name of the country. So her father had multiple wives, which, as you know, has been the custom around the world for far longer than it hasn't. His first wife that he married simply because she was the most suitable for the position of queen. She bore him a son whom they named Mbandi, but he turned out to be fat, lazy, and useless, and showed no interest in athletic or military activity, nor in intellectual or diplomatic pursuits. The first wife turned out to be a schemer and was hated among the royal compounds, where she constantly plotted to get her son on the throne. It's a very familiar story, isn't it? Especially you start hearing about power and royalty, and that kind of interaction always seems to take place. So you all have seen this plot how many times in the movies, man? I mean, that's how popular, that's how, like, I guess, that's how common that this was, to have the fat, lazy child and his scheming mother always trying to maneuver him into a position of power. You know, so yeah, this is, man. Anyway, you can just see here though that they don't just make this stuff up. It's always been a reality among so-called royalty or people with wealth, power, you know, just even a little bit of money, and all of a sudden they all tend to manifest these same personality traits. It's crazy how that works. So everybody want to run around calling themselves kings and queens, but those were the most ruthless, sneaky, and treacherous people on the planet. They always have been. Now there were some who were okay and the people loved them, but that was far few and in between among the ruling class, no matter what nation or time period that you look at. Now, the Mbandi did eventually become king, and he was one of the ones who made deals with the Portuguese and sold and traded African slaves to them. So now we got the reverse. See, so well, I guess you still had a corrupt king with Niska's situation. So the king was corrupt and was selling slaves. And so again, here you have the corrupt king that's selling slaves, involved in the slave trade. But Nzinga has strongly opposed her brother's participation in the slave trade, but he mostly ignored her. It was not until the Portuguese traders began to make heavier demands on Mbandi for even more slaves, thereby reducing his profit from the trade. And then that's when he decided to resist and declare war. See, when it no longer became profitable and they kept asking for more slaves and started putting pressure on him, that's when he declared war. So it wasn't about what was right. It wasn't about saving the people. It was about his profit margin. Okay, but his sister had always opposed it. Nzinga, that was his sister, Nzinga. She had always opposed it. She never went along with that. Okay? Why didn't they make the movie about her? See? The war between the Portuguese and the Ndongo people lasted for several years until the Portuguese decided that a peace conference would be held for both sides to negotiate an end to the war. It was at this conference that Nzinga would display her immense pride, determination, and iron will, traits that the Portuguese would be forced to reckon with for the next 4 decades. All right? The conference was held in the city of Luanda in 1622. Nzinga, though not yet queen, was the most able and uncompromising member of the royal delegates sent to represent the king. Despite the alleged purpose of the conference, which was to negotiate peace, The racist attitudes of the Portuguese were in full display. The governor only provided chairs in the conference room for him and his counselors, in an attempt to force the future king to stand humbly before his presence. Nzinga and her people were unfazed by the governor's arrogance. Her attendants promptly rolled out the royal carpet for Nzinga, and then one of them went down on all fours and formed himself into a human throne for her to sit on. See what I'm saying? Come on, man. Our people was on a different level, you know. As further back you go, I mean, it was on a different level. It was different back then. This was a move that spoke volumes, not only about the fierce and unbreakable spirit that she possessed, but also about the tremendous respect and devotion that her people had for her. In 1623, after the death of her brother, Nzinga became the queen of Ndongo at age 41. Can you not already see the difference between the bloodthirsty she-beast that Viola Davis portrayed and a true warrior queen that fought against the slave masters rather than against her own people? See the difference? Okay. Then flip it around in the movies and make her into a hero fighting the slavers, but she was the beast. See? So let's go in on it, man. Stay with me for a little bit because I'm gonna kind of go fast on this. All right. So the Portuguese had not respected the peace treaty that was signed at Luanda the year before, as they had continued their slave trading operations in Ndongo. Her first major move as queen was to deliver an ultimatum to the Portuguese, demanding that they respect the terms of the treaty or else war would be declared. The Portuguese ignored her warning, and so in that same year, Nzinga went to war with them and commanded a series of devastating strikes, defeating them in many battles. See the difference? See? Look, man, Naniska wasn't shit compared to her. She would have whooped Naniska's ass. But they didn't talk about her. They didn't make the movie about her. Why? See? Nzinga was an incredibly strong and charismatic woman. She was clearly loved by the people of Ndongo, able to rally masses of them to listen to her messages. A brave general, she was known to personally lead her troops into battle, and she forbade her subjects to call her queen, preferring the masculine title of king. See, this is the true woman king. Okay, she wanted the same respect that the king got. The queen, especially in Africa, didn't have the same power and rights as the king, so she said to call her king so that, you know, she would have full privilege, full rights. Yet her aggressive traits were balanced by her charming and engaging personality, which she used to her own advantages when forming alliances with other kingdoms. See the difference? Now she is forming alliances with the other kingdoms, whereas Naniska and the Dahomey were enslaving them. Now, some of us might take issue with this today because we've been so bombarded with this genderless bullshit out here. We might see this part and say, oh, hell, see, here we go again. But I think you have to look at this thing in context. Keep in mind that this woman was now ruling the entire clan and was fighting off a whole nation with her army. And now, which was primarily women. But keep in mind now, this is a different group here. So she didn't start out in power. Therefore, they already had a masculine male army in place before she came to power. So when she got into power, I'm sure that she had, from the sound of it, she had her own women army already. And then when she came to power, they blended together. But she was the king / sole ruler of the nation. All right. She understood that one of the most important parts of war wasn't just the soldiers and the weapons, but also psychological warfare was a major part of it. She was leading a people who had only ever known and respected and followed the orders of their king. Now here was this woman sitting on the throne And it could have been that some of them had a problem with it. So she may, and of course we'll never know for sure, but she may have started doing things to work within their already pre-configured psychological parameters. See, like maybe she started dressing more like the men and looking more like the men and forcing them to call her king in order to keep the armies united and willing to fight for her. Today, if that happened, it would just be some LG3 TUV6 type bullshit. But back then, she was trying to unify her people. There's a big difference. Context is everything. So she's unifying her people against an invading force that's coming in to enslave and destroy her people. And she did what was necessary to try to defend them and preserve her culture and her people. And so that's a big difference from the way that the Naniska and the Dahomey did it, and why they did it. Big difference. So clever was the queen that she was able to take advantage of the Dutch arrival in Angola and form an alliance with them against the Portuguese. Certainly the Dutch were not there as liberators of the Africans. They were there, they were merely competing against Portugal for a greater share of the slave trade. Still, Naniska was wise enough to side with the foreigners to suit her own needs, a tactic that she would use later in her life by pretending to adopt Christianity. One of Nzinga's greatest acts as queen occurred in 1624 when she declared all territory over which she had control to be a free country. All slaves that could reach it from any region were forever free and were fall under the protection of her kingdom. This was to have a monumental impact as thousands of slaves deserted the Portuguese and held areas and headed for Nzinga's land, strengthening her armies in the process. See, that's what our people are missing right now today. She was playing chess, not checkers. See, she wasn't playing hopscotch either. She was playing chess. She was playing the real game. She was doing the real deal. And she had some Monopoly tied in with it, although the game didn't exist back then, but she was doing some Monopoly tied in with some chess. All right? She would make one move and fuck them over for the next 10 turns. Now, she got them infiltrated. She got their guns. She got her own people in there still pretending to be on their side, and they're feeding back information, weapons, ammo, coming back to her right out of their camp. All right? She got their soldiers, and she hadn't even fired a shot yet for that whole interaction. This is just the subterfuge infiltration phase. All right? This is all done by, you could say that the first part of the war was done by her scouts. See? But she took out half their soldiers while doubling her own army just by saying this is free land and if you can get here, we'll take care of you. Cut their army in half or more than half without a single shot and bolstered hers. See? Why wasn't the movie The Woman King about Nzinga, who called herself king and was a woman? Y'all need to think about that one, man. Nzinga was perhaps the first black nationalist. By opening her territory to anyone escaping slavery, she transcended all of the various ethnic and cultural differences of the people in the Angolan region. She saw that the common enemy was the Portuguese, who had been the masterminds of the slave trade, and its devastating effect that it had on her people for over 100 years. Nzinga was well aware that the Portuguese used black soldiers to fight their wars for them. See? And so she undertook a carefully organized attempt to infiltrate and destroy this use of black soldiers by Europeans. She's smarter than the people today, man. Come on now. She had several groups of her men wander back into Portuguese territory and enlist in the military service. Once her agents were established, they were able to convert whole companies of men to rebel against the Portuguese and join the cause of the Queen, taking with them the much needed guns and ammunition when they escaped. See, the Portuguese were outraged at this seemingly unbeatable black queen who constantly thwarted their efforts to conquer all of Angola. Their tactics of divide and conquer were ineffective against her because there was so much patriotism and fanatical devotion towards her. That's another thing our people have never had, is devotion towards patriotism and devotion towards any cause that black leaders have tried to establish. All these black organizations and leaders in the past have been thwarted, overturned, and assassinated, taken out of the picture by the very same black people that they were trying to lead and save and protect. So that wasn't the case here. So what they did is they tried to discredit Nzinga. Here we go with the smear campaigns, then you come in with that. You see how old that tactic is. So they tried to discredit Nzinga by formally declaring that she was the illegitimate ruler of Angola, and by appointing their own ruler, King Philip. In 1626, Nzinga's stronghold in the city of Kwanzaa was captured, and she was forced to retreat from her own country. Her time away seemingly only made her stronger, though, for in 1627, she returned to her country at the head of a strong army and recaptured Kwanzaa, sending the puppet King Philip fleeing for his life. During her exile, Nzinga had become the queen of the country of Matamba as well. And so she returned as the empress of two nations, more determined than ever to liberate her people. Despite several losses, including the capture and beheading of her sister by the hands of the Portuguese, Nzinga's spirit was never broken. She valiantly fought and held off the Portuguese control of Angola for over 30 years. Finally, in 1659, Nzinga, now more than 75 years old and perhaps weary from the long years of struggle, signed a peace treaty with the Portuguese. The remaining years of her life were spent trying to reconstruct her nation, seriously depleted by all the years of conflict. See, all of them is the same thing, man. You just get wore down, all that constant fighting. It's the same thing. We can go off in another direction and say, men that's in the home with the constant arguing and bickering and back and forth, and that man gets wore down, and he just starts to go down, can't fight anymore. Great warrior, he's a strong, powerful man, productive. But if he's caught in a household where he's just in constant battle, he just gets wore down. And so, sure enough, you can look and see that men almost always die at younger ages than the women. And so here we see a historical reference to entire kingdoms undergoing that same wear-down tactic, where the constant fighting and the bickering and going back and forth and constant wars, and then the people begin to diminish, and the country, the whole country starts to become weaker as a result of this constant war and fighting and back and forth, and it's too much. So if a whole country can't withstand it, then a single man definitely stands no chance in a war-torn, negative energy household. Because that's one of the things that people look at, in terms of, that's one of the big hot topics of today, is why men have left the home. And all of this stuff ties together, and you can tie it in with history. It all ties together. There's no one thing, and then that's just it, all separate. So you can see how this can be connected and can be tied in with that, and just shown in this as an example of here where you have all these men, black men, have left their homes because they got tired of the constant bickering and the fighting and the wars. And here we have an entire kingdom that was engaged in the same thing, and even the woman king had to go and sign a peace treaty to try to stop all this bickering and fighting and the wars. It's too much. It's too much. I don't care how big and bad you are. Eventually, you just it gets to be, too much. And so here we are. So she finally signed a peace treaty. She devoted her efforts to resettling former slaves and developing an economy of free men and women that could succeed without the slave trade. Nzinga passed away in 1663 at the age of 80. Sadly, the massive expansion of the Portuguese slave trade and the eventual conquest of Angola followed her death. So none of her successors possessed her indomitable spirit, and so when she passed, that was it, and the Portuguese was able to come on in and basically do whatever they wanted to do. So though she did not succeed in expelling the Portuguese from her country, her historical legacy is of great importance, and as she had awakened the spirit of nationalism and black unity among her people in resistance to European domination. And she did it in a way, in a fashion that made history. And so far that I've seen has never been duplicated since by neither man nor woman. There's men out here that have done great things, fantastic things, just, amazing things. But in terms of uniting the people under one cause, we got some that came close. We got some that lasted for a long time. Brother Malcolm and Elijah and Farrakhan, and so you got even today, Farrakhan still has a lot of people united under him, and able to follow along his lead. And whenever you see Muslims, they look sharp, clean, they speak well, intelligent, they're knowledgeable. So they're still doing it. They've been doing it for what now, maybe almost 100 years now. So so that's saying something. But they're not out here taking anything over. But that's not you don't have to get out here and fight a war today. You can just get out here and buy everything now. So maybe they just buying everything up and just doing it quiet, which we wouldn't know about it then anyway. It wouldn't be smart to broadcast something like that. So maybe they are. I don't know. But I've seen this one brother speaking recently, Nuri Muhammad, and so I was like, okay, yeah, he's sharp. That's a sharp cat there. So so they're still doing their thing, man. So. But when you hear we're going all the way back to the 1600s, and you see where women are out here killing it and doing their thing and knocking it out the box, and it's just really making history. Although the ones that we look at, they're supposed to be giving us this information. Somebody that's making a multi-million-dollar movie, maybe a $50 million movie, and it's a black woman and a black man, and they doing their thing, and you would think that they would have given us this information, but they went another direction and gave us a beast to clap for. That's saying something. That's saying a lot right there. Her legend would serve as an inspiration to the later resistance and anti-colonial movements that would occur throughout the West Central African regions. To this day, her memory lives on among the oral traditions of the Angolan people, who have not forgotten their great warrior queen / king, Nzinga of Angola. That's the black history that you will never learn in any school or college. That's just a little piece of it, okay? And you will never see her story told in a $50 million movie. You were never supposed to know about her. They want to keep that kind of information top secret, because you might mess around and start getting some pride about yourself to know that somebody of that caliber was out there in history and fighting and doing what was right and held off an entire nation, like Portugal. They held off all the entire Portuguese army. Could not mess with that region because they couldn't get through her. They couldn't get through until she was past of old age and out of the way. And nobody behind her had that strength and that power and that will and indomitable spirit to be able to resist it like she did, so they were able to come in after that. Now, you might want to stop wearing some fake hair and stop covering your beautiful skin with those horrific looking tattoos, laying on the table topless so some stranger can punch holes in your nipples and carve pictures on your chest, start learning about stuff like this, and it might put a stop to all of that foolishness. So you never hear about it, but they don't hide it either. See, when you get some pride about yourself and you hear these types of stories, maybe you stop doing shit like that and getting your arms and your body and everything all carved the hell up. So maybe the knowledge, getting some extra knowledge, can help bringing you up to higher levels where you stop doing self-destructive activities. Maybe this will help. I hope this will help. But the information is out there. And as I say, they don't hide it. It's there. You just got to go look it up. And you got to spend the next 3 or 4 months studying it, researching it, saving photos, saving video, and educating yourself into the levels that you were never supposed to be on. You don't have to, that's up to you. But you need to know that there's information out there, like what I just told you, that could change your life. Okay? So, if you can stop carving yourself up for a while and covering up your hair with these ridiculous fake hair wigs, these little helmets that they run around in, if you all can stop with the foolishness long enough to go do some research, you might change your life. Now, let me show you something. I'm going to ask you again. Why didn't they make the movie Woman King about a woman who called herself king and fought for the liberation of her people? It fits all the criteria in terms of what they were trying to say in that movie. They made that movie into, it was basically fiction, but all they had to do was tell the real history, and then they wouldn't even they had to call it fiction. It could have actually have been almost a documentary or a real life, depiction of something that actually happened in history. Why didn't they take, why did they take an evil, bloodthirsty tribe of slavers and lie and turn them into heroes? Why would they spend $50 million deceiving black people into clapping for and glorifying people who slaughtered and chained and enslaved their ancestors and played a key role in sending them to the hell that they endured here in this country? Imagine if people tricked some Jews into clapping for Hitler by putting a cape on him and changing the story to where he was saving Jews. Super Hitler, Hitler's his secret name, and his hero name is Superior, Captain Superior, and he's flying around and he fights and defends the rights of Jews all around the world. Okay, in particular, but his home base is in Germany, and he defends them. Imagine the outrage that would follow something like that. I guarantee you that the studio that did it would get shut down, and every actor in the movie would never work, or they would never get another job in Hollywood, and a few of them might even come up missing. But our people are cheering for the slavers, and I guarantee you that not a damn thing will happen to them. These fools sitting up here talking about, but it's a good movie though, lots of action, and the acting was great. Do you think that if somebody made Hitler into the action hero, into that action, the superstar, and he's saving Jews, you think the Jews would say, well, you know, forget what actually happened with Hitler, you know, but the action in this movie was great. You know, they had a lot of stuff, man. The spaceships was in there, and you know, yeah, the aliens, and he ripping them, tearing up the concentration camps. Man, yeah, it was good. It was a good movie. You couldn't even get a director or a writer or a producer to take the job. And if they did, that would have been their last job. Guaranteed. This shows that only a Negro would go along with glorifying the slavers and destroyers of their own people. I'm not so much talking about the audience because they didn't know. Now, that's a whole other thing. How many audience members, by the time they went to go see it, knew that it was fiction and that they had changed things around, and that the movie that they were going to go see was actually about an army of women that fought to sustain and enforce and to grow the slave trade of Africa? How many went to go see it knowing that and didn't care and went to go see it anyway? That's a whole nother thing right there. Okay? I like to imagine that the majority of the ones that went to go see it didn't know that and went thinking that these were actual heroes. But the ones that were in it did know. They knew what they were doing. And you can't tell me that the ones that were in it had absolutely no knowledge. Because as a matter of fact, there was interviews where they had talked to Viola and asked her about, you know, the fact that they were actually slave traders that they were portraying, and you know, they talked about creative license and all of this type of deal, and you know, so yeah, she knew. All right, but so here she is promoting this switch around. Nobody else would do this but a Negro. So let's take a look back. So let's take a look at these the ones who wrote and produced this movie. Who's behind this? Oh, yeah. This looks like a problem, doesn't it? I mean, maybe it's just me, but does anybody else see a problem here? These are the producers and writers and directors of this movie, right here. What? Only 2 Negroes involved in the production of this movie, and he's her husband, so he doesn't even count. Uh-oh. Yeah, now y'all see it, don't you? Yep. You know what's weird, though? I think there's a word for taking something that's evil and making people believe it's good and cheer for it, or taking something good and turning it into evil. What is that? I can't think what it's called. Semantics? No, that's not it. What is it when you flip evil into good and make good seem evil? I can't think the name of it. Germanic? No. Hispanic? Now do you see why they didn't use Nzinga's story? Because making you cheer for a real hero would have defeated the purpose. They wanted the people to cheer for evil, and they are supporting it. Woman King made $19 million in the opening weekend in America. $7 million more than Sony, the distributor, had predicted. Female viewers made up the majority of the ticket sales. And every last one of them are participating in Satanism, the glorification of evil, celebrating the destruction, slaughter, and enslavement of their own ancestors. And they'll have to pay for it. Ignorance doesn't get you off. If you get tricked into practicing Satanism, you generate karma and will have to go through the trials and tribulations to work that karma off. You have given your money to Satanists, to demon and devil worshipers. You have cheered and clapped for the destruction of innocent people. You have supported and praised blood drinkers. All those women cheering and clapping and screaming in that bathroom.
They're all chanting and ruminating that cannot be quantified by words. It's an undeniable, powerful story. We're in an industry that doesn't see the power black women have at the global box office.
Woman king, baby.
I've said before.
All of you all have to pay. You can't bring the black man into this one. Y'all got all of that. We didn't have anything to do with this, except the fool that she got in there playing with her husband. Okay? A lot of people may not believe in karma, but it doesn't matter if you believe it or not, because you're still going to go through it because of your actions. You're still held to it. Okay? You all thought that you had it rough before. Just watch what happens here now over the next few months or the next few years. Y'all thought it was bad before. You don't get to celebrate the destruction of your own people and walk away from that scot-free. It doesn't matter whether you knew you were celebrating or not, because you were supposed to have studied to have shown yourself approved unto God. Ain't that what your Bible say? That's in your Bible. I'm not even a Christian, and yet I know your Bible, and I know it says to study to show thyself approved unto God. So if you have not studied and you don't know what's real and what's not, and you fall for these satanic tricks, and you glorify and worship the slaughter of innocents under the pretense that you were cheering for a hero, that's your ignorance. You don't get off because of that. You've had plenty of time to have educated yourself by now and to have had some knowledge to be able to have looked at just the trailers for that should have told you something was wrong when they had the woman up there with the spear going into her shoulder and his shoulder, and the man just all the time, the man is weak and falling, and the woman is always triumphant, the man is always down on his knees and he just can't do it, and he's crying and he's upset, he's always a loser, and you all don't see anything wrong with that. You all think it's cute. You gotta pay for that. So yeah, those women in the bathroom were just an example of what's going on out here in the streets. So the blacks who supported it across the nation, I'd say if you know any black people who did support it, hip them on to this information. Let them know the real deal. Steer them clear, or just let them watch the video. You probably ain't gonna get nobody to sit down for an hour and to look at anything real. You put on the episode of Atlanta Housewives and they'll watch the marathon for 7-8 hours straight. Put something like this on 10 minutes in. Oh, how long is this? See? So, yeah. If you can show it to them, get them to watch it, hip them onto it. Spread it around, pass it around. Yeah. Let people know. Because they got that karma coming around and it's going to catch up to them. You don't have to believe me. Just don't say you weren't warned. You can say, oh, he don't know what he's talking about. You know what? That's fine. But my job is done. I put the information out there to you. I'm letting you know what's going on. All right? So, now, in closing, let me say this. I felt strongly compelled to make this video because of the grand satanic deception that was being perpetrated upon the people. That shit needs to be exposed and the door broken off the trap, that more and more of our people were falling into regarding this movie. But you'll notice, if you look at my other videos, that my content is far from dealing with as slavery as you can get. I just really don't go into that stuff. I look at it as, come on, man, let's move past it. We got to keep talking about this forever. We know what happened. Let's move. Let's keep it going. Let's move forward. But I think it's very important that all of us get as far away from it as possible. It's fine, like I said, to know your history, but you already know our ancestors were slaves. So why are we still going back to see slave movies? Why are you letting those people profit off of the pain and the misery and the destruction of our ancestors? You already saw the Who Made the Woman King, a bunch of white women, and then they got and then they ended that the LG3. They ended all of that. That's who's making this, okay? So then you got a Negro woman to play the main part, and she brings her Negro husband along, and these are the controlling forces behind that movie, and you let them make a profit from a satanic misrepresentation of the destruction of our ancestors? Come on, man. See? Even in a movie with a predominantly black cast, you're fostering white supremacy. They don't have to do anything to be supreme. Just let black ignorance run rampant through the people and you destroy yourselves, and they stay on top kicking and chilling, doing their thing and making money off of your destruction. That's what makes them supreme, is you out here doing stupid shit like this. They laugh at the ignorance of Negroes. It's hilarious to them, okay? And then their bank account's just getting bigger and bigger as you continue to destroy yourselves and destroy each other, all right? So you go through and wipe yourself out while they count up how much money that they made that day. Hell no, man. Let them starve. Educate yourself. Straighten up. Get yourself together. Okay? Stop participating in these damn slave movies. Don't even take the part. Don't even sign up for the role. If Viola and whoever else want to go out and make one, let them run around and be the damn slave. Nobody else should be signing up for that shit. You know, nobody else should be dressing up as running around in Africa in the 1500s or 1300s, half naked with a spear in your hand, going around and slaughtering another African village. Man, done with that, man. We done with that. Let's move past that. That's enough of this roots shit, man. Let it go. Let that shit die. Let's move forward. You better off making some kind of a black Star Trek type of a movie, something Star Wars, something where you have these elite black people that have mastered the arts and the scientists and have started moving around through space and the stars and the planets or something like that. Now, something like that, I'd rather watch something like that. That'd be cool. Now we're talking. And there's some truth to that. But yeah, we ain't going into all that. But I think that most of you believe that you're somehow honoring our fallen ancestors by watching anything to do with slavery. But that is not honoring them. That is dishonoring them and disrespecting their hopes and dreams. Why? Because they would have never wanted anything to do with it if they had had the option. They would have never read about it. They would have never watched a movie about it. They would have never watched a whole TV series about it. They wanted their descendants to be free and to grow up and to prosper and to never look back. They wanted their children and their children's children to move forward and to grow, into a people that had no connections or reenactments of what they were going through during their time. Okay? They would want that whole slave event to fall into the fog of history, forever lost in time, as their descendants move forward in greatness, prosperity, life, freedom, happiness, love, peace, and harmony. They would never want to see any of us sitting around watching depictions of them being whipped, beaten, raped, and brutalized. They wouldn't want that. They would risk their lives to save their children and to keep their children out of slavery. Why would they want to sit them in front of a TV to watch it? We the only ones doing this shit, man. Not me, but this generation. Why do you keep letting those people piss on your soul and rip the joy out of your heart over and over and over and over again? Continuing to watch and support this bullshit, giving these jackals your money to keep making more and more from your pain and sorrow. You aren't even making black studios rich by watching that crap. You're making white studios rich by watching that crap. They're profiting from your pain, and you're willingly participating in this. Hell no, man. Flip this thing around. You can't stop them from writing more slave movies, but you can get a spine in your back and not watch it. You can develop a sense of pride and dignity and stop agreeing to play the roles, no matter what kind of money that they offer you. They might offer you $20,000, $200,000 to play a role. Great, that's a big payday. $500,000, $700,000. We'll give you $700,000 to put on these rags and crawl around on all fours and say yes, ball. See? But the video of you crawling around on the ground like a dog, doing all of that, following your white masters and eating his scraps off the floor and letting him whip on you, that video will be around forever and will be used against every black person really on the planet. As to look at them. There they go, look. And they actually got a real black person crawling around and doing this. Okay? 150 years from now, you'll be dead and gone, but people will still be able to watch the video of you being whipped and led around on a leash. That money and everything you buy with it will be tainted by your own shame and guilt. You already know what happened. Now let it go. Move forward and start thinking of what kinds of businesses you can build. That's what they don't want you to do. And I'm not talking about white people in general. Your white neighbor next door probably doesn't even have a problem with you. They're probably a great guy or a great woman or whatever, you know. They get up and go to work every day just like you. They get out and sweat in the sun while they cut their grass just like you. They aren't the problem. I'm talking about the TPB, the powers that be. The ones that own these billion-dollar studios that are establishing the doctrines that have been tearing this country apart for over 100 years. They're the ones making this on TV. They couldn't even get to TV if it don't go through them and get approved. Okay? So they're the ones that's putting this stuff out here. You got a small studio that can make a film like that, but they got to go through the channels to get it broadcast all across the nation, all around the world. And if it gets up there into that little system with the powers that be, and they say, nope, we're not putting that out here, like if you had Captain Superior, Hitler flying around with a cape, that's not getting through the channels. That's not going all around the world. They're not going to open that up in 100 theaters in Australia and 500 theaters in Germany. And no, that's not going anywhere. That's going to stay. You could make the movie, but then you start presenting it to try to get it into the theaters, and it'll never go. All right? That's who I'm talking about, these powers that be. All right? So it's up to you to move forward, and it's up to you to get your money together and build black studios, and then start making the kinds of movies that we want to see, movies that we would enjoy. You letting these people out here put this stuff together and put it out there, and then you go watch it and give them your money. Even if they put it out there, don't go see it. Let this shit die, man. When they put a movie out there at the theater, and you know this kind of, here we go with some more slave shit. When you see it, let it drop. Don't give them a dime. Even out of curiosity. Well, I just want to see, because they said this one is about, no. It's a damn slave movie. They trying to take you back 200 years. Let it drop. Let that shit flop. At the box office, let them lose the money that they invested in it. Don't let them make a dime off of you, and that's the best thing you could do with it. You know. And so what's even better is if you have your own production. You don't want to start your own production studio? I got the PayPal thing up there. Invest in mine. Send some money up there, and then I'll make it. Okay? There's ways to get this done. You all want to see movies with us in it? If you don't want to do it and you don't have the equipment, the skills, and the talents, whatever, send me the money. I'll do it. I'll put some folks together. We'll get some things together going on this end, and I'll do it. You know, I'm already doing some things just with my own little nickels and dimes. You're looking at it. So who knows what I would be able to do if I had hundreds of thousands or millions to work with. What could I produce then? You know, let's find out. Here go to PayPal, send it over there. So, yeah, we can make better movies. We don't have to keep doing this slave shit. We can make what we want to see. Movies that we would enjoy. Movies that uplift and empower people and make them feel good and hopeful about life. Especially our people who have been depicted on screen as nothing but slaves and thugs, gangsters, shuffling idiots, and comic relief ever since movies were invented. We need to see ourselves as black superheroes, black warriors, movies that we can watch and learn our black history from just from watching the movie. All right, speaking of which, check this out. I just came across this the other day. All right, your boy Ice Cube posted this the other day. He said he sent in 2 scripts so far to try and get a new Friday movie made, but they rejected both of the scripts. He says that they don't believe in the culture. First of all, it's 2022. That shit is over, man. The first Friday movie was right on time, and one of the funniest movies that I ever watched, but I couldn't even get through the second one. It just didn't have the same energy. It just wasn't there. I couldn't get into the second one. I got maybe halfway through it, and I just lost interest in it, and I was done with it. I didn't even try to watch the third one. The whole cast is old now and gray. Many of them have already passed on, man. You know, so it's gone, man. It's a wrap. Let that shit die already, man. See, this is what I'm talking about. So secondly, Ice Cube got enough money to make his own goddamn movie. Why in the fuck is he begging white folks to make black movies? That's as far as we got. We still there? Why are we? Or maybe because he's out of Hollywood. So maybe he has to ask permission before he can do stuff like that. Maybe that's why. I don't know. But third, if you do make a black movie, why is it always about Negroes running around clowning and acting like a goddamn fool, man? Why we always got to be the comic relief or the thug or the gangster? See what I'm saying? That's what I'm talking about. Fourth, since when did the ignorance and coonery depicted in the Friday series become quote-unquote our culture? He said they don't believe in the culture. What culture? Okay, that black culture, is that black culture now? Clowning and cracking jokes for 2 hours, making fun of everybody's clothes and hair and shoes, drinking till you pass out, smoking till you choke. That's black culture? So that's all you got to offer, bruh? More foolishness? Then we owe Warner Brothers a sincere thank you. Because we damn sure don't need any more shucking and jiving, itching and scratching on the screen. That's enough of that, man. Fuck out of here with that bullshit, dog. Fifth, Ice Cube is 53 years old, a rich movie star, a rich rapper, and a successful entrepreneur living in a $7.2 million home. So how come every time we see him, he's still dressed like a 20-year-old gangbanger? That cat is stuck in 1991, man. Or maybe, again, because he's Hollywood, so maybe they tell him that this is how he has to present himself. You got to keep up the act. It's an act. And so, that's how they eat. That's how they make money off of that act. They put him out there, and he makes money off of the act. So they keep this act going, this gangbanger thing, keep it going. All right? And so maybe he's not allowed to just, because I guess it would ruin his reputation and his image if he just showed up wearing a shirt and tie and had a regular haircut and was standing there looking like a politician or whatever. They were like, hey, what is this dude talking about? They probably wouldn't be able to. That would kill the whole Ice Cube vibe. So maybe he got to keep the act up to stay connected to that Hollywood money. They don't want him in there looking like Obama. All right, they want him in there looking like a gangster. Maybe I'm wrong, but that's what it seemed like. So yeah, this cat is he's stuck in 1991, man, and it seems like All he's got to offer is more old-ass 1990s high school level buffoonery. Now, are you trying to get 2 more Friday movies up there, 2 more scripts put up there? You trying to get a Friday movie made? Come on, man. That is not what we need right now, for real. So all of that had its day, and now that day is over. This is the time to build, to grow, to learn, to get knowledge and intellect, and to begin to behave and act and elevate ourselves to much, much higher levels than what we have ever been on before. We do not need to be sitting around watching Negroes crack jokes on each other's hair and clothes these days. That is over. Man, it's so much we could be doing these days. Nobody has time to be sitting around watching that bullshit, watching Friday and giggling at foolishness for 2 hours, watching Roots and crying again and again over and over from something 200 years ago that you weren't even involved in, and based on the movie that didn't even happen. So stop being so damn gullible and weak and letting people twist your emotions around like bubble gum. Okay? Don't watch it. Don't sign up for the roles, and they'll disappear. It's all based on money. You stop giving them your money, it'll disappear. All right? Use that money to go take a computer class. Take a programming class. Educate yourself. Learn how to use the technology of the day. You have the opportunity. Okay? Why aren't we using? Don't waste your time on watching slave shit. Go and use that time and money to educate yourself and become a technical professional. Alright? So that's how you flip it. If they get you to worship evil and that's satanic, then it must be divine to take your time and energy and put it towards something productive. Okay? So now I've heard some people say online, again, black women, I hadn't heard black men say this, but I've heard black women online posting many times actually, and they say, well, nobody ever tells the Jews to stop watching movies about the Holocaust. Why are you telling us to stop watching movies about slavery? Now, I explained this in part 1, and we're going to just touch on it. They own the studios that are making Holocaust movies. And every time they make one, they make hundreds of millions of dollars from it. But they also make the movies about slavery. And every time they make one, once again, they make hundreds of millions of dollars from it. All you get from that shit is a headache and a broken heart. Leave it alone and move forward. We're over 100 years behind the rest of the world as a people. So as far as sitting around and watching foolishness at this late date, man, look, man, ain't nobody got time for it. All the play stuff, it's over. Okay? Start learning about the computers and technology and science and math, and take a computer programming class, web design, HTML5, learn to build computers, learn woodworking, learn to paint, learn to draw, learn to animate, learn how to make jewelry. See, now you're crossing into their territory now. Get some of those raw, uncut diamonds that they don't cost hardly anything to get some raw, uncut diamonds, and start practicing and learn how to cut them into the different little shapes and stuff and polish them. See? You're going to mess up the first 100 of them, but so what? By the time you cut number 200, you'll be a master at it. Now you're selling millions of dollars worth of diamonds that you only spent $50 for, just like them. See? Now if you get all of that going on, you ain't even going to have time to sit around watching some bullshit from almost 200 years ago. Black folk getting whipped and slaves and babies and sold. You ain't got time to sit and watch that. Dropping all the crocodile tears. You ain't going to even have time for it. Okay? But now, everything what I just told you to do, that's what your ancestors would have wanted. Honor them by doing what they always wanted to do themselves. Being free, happy, prosperous, successful, and turn off that bullshit. So if you want to talk about white supremacy, just keep in mind what you learned here today. Wherever you see a white person in a position of supremacy, just look around, and somewhere nearby, I guarantee you'll see some ignorant black fools that put them there. So don't get mad at white people for making yet another slave movie. Get mad at the ignorant black fools who watch it and the black fools who signed up to play the roles. Now, the last thing I want to say is I said that before, I'm going to say it again. The last thing I want to say, it's the second last thing I want to say, is directly to these black women who watch and believe this garbage that they show on TV and in these movies. And now it's got you all gassed up and ready to attack or even kill black men on sight, all pissed off because of who you chose to lay with. Now we're all the enemy, okay, because of who you've been laying with. And that started with this whole, I'm a strong, independent woman, and I don't need no man. That started with that, okay? Now all of a sudden, black men ain't shit. Black man ain't this. Black man ain't that. We don't need no man. I don't want no man. Okay? Least of all these niggas, I don't need no niggas. I'm good. I'm free. I'm an independent, free one. I don't need none of them. Okay, got it. We're gonna go in on that for the next one. Not to change your mind, we good out here. Believe me, we good out here. But I'm gonna tell you where you fucked up, how they got you again. That's gonna be part 3 to this little mini series, and hopefully the final part, unless something else comes up that needs to be addressed. And on that note, I say to you,
turn off that bullshit. You're blind, baby. You're blind from the facts on who you are because you're watching that garbage.
peace.